All right, wrap up time for this week's Much Abrew About Nothing featuring Skred Red in Modern. And I have to say, as someone who really loves Blood Moon decks, I was pretty disappointed with how this one turned out. So we ended up winning 2 out of our 5 matches, which is not really great. That's like against the odds level as far as win percentage is concerned. We ended up beating Blue Moon and Jund, losing to Grizzlebrand, Infect, and to a Through the Breach Primeval Titan Valakut deck. Regardless, though, it felt like our deck was just so scattered. I think that Skred Red is better than this particular build was. So there's a few things that I'm kind of questionable about with this deck. The numbers are just very strange to me. So number one, having essentially 6 pyroclasms feels like way too many. Maybe 4 would be a more correct number. 3 or 4. Pyroclasm is very good in some matchups, great in some matchups, but it's also kind of sketchy in some matchups as well, or doesn't do anything. The big problem, though, is disregarding the correct number on the pyroclasm effects, is we just don't have enough Blood Moons. Skred Red is a Blood Moon deck. A lot of builds of Skred Red play the full 4 Blood Moons in the main on top of 2 or 3 Magus of the Moons to try to make sure that every single game on turn 3 you're going to be playing a Blood Moon and hopefully locking the opponent out of the game. Blood Moon is still very good, and a lot of our wins were because of Blood Moon, and a lot of the games that we almost won were because Blood Moon was keeping us in the game. So I think we need to maximize on the Blood Moons, go down a little bit on the Pyroclasm type effects, just because they're hit or miss. And then one thing that's odd to me, and I don't know if this is right or wrong necessarily, but a lot of the older versions or different versions of Skred Red play Boros Reckoner because it's a sweet combo with Skred. You get a bunch of snow-covered mountains on the battlefield, target your own Boros Reckoner, and instead of just being 1 mana kill a creature, it's 1 mana deal 6 damage, 8 damage to your opponent. So it's kind of this backup way of winning the game. And that's one of the things I noticed in our games is we had some real major inconsistencies. We would have a lot of games where we would either, well, get stuck on lands, but that's going to happen, but we would just draw a bunch of reactive spells, lightning bolts and screds and pyroclasms and roasts and volcanic fallouts and all this stuff that, like, kills our opponent's creatures, hopefully, but doesn't really do anything. And in some matchups, that's okay, and we can stay in the game that way. In other matchups, those cards just don't do anything. Our opponent just ramps, plays a Primeval Titan, or reanimates a Grizzlebrand, and all the Skreds in the world aren't really going to save us from what our opponent's doing. So having a way to turn Skred from just a removal spell into sort of a combo piece seems to have potential. Other questions, Godo, is that really worth it to play a single sort of War and Peace, the Batterskull, and the Godo? Or would it be better just to play an additional Worm Coil, perhaps, in that slot? 4 Mind Stones, a little bit questionable. It might be better to have some number of Simian Spirit Guides. The problem is, and I think it's just this build, I think if I was going to play this deck again, I would keep the Skred plan and keep things somewhat similar to how they are now, but play more elements to make the deck play a little bit more like the free win red deck we used to play. Not exactly, and not go all in on rituals and so forth for like turn 1 Blood Moon as fast as possible, but maybe instead of 2 or 3 of the Mind Stones, play 2 or 3 Simian Spirit Guides, because those do help us get faster Blood Moons when Mind Stone really doesn't. You play it on turn 2, you're still Blood Mooning on turn 3, and in some matchups, Blood Moon a turn earlier is very helpful and important. So I don't know. I think that, as I said before, Skred is probably better than these matches give it credit for. We also ran into some questionable matchups. We really don't have great answers to Grishlebrand or something like that, especially when they have basic lands and our Blood Moons don't do anything, and we don't have enough Blood Moons anyway, so we just don't have a great answer to some of the unfair decks in the format. Like, in fact, like Burn, for example, we just don't have great answers and great ways to really deal with those decks are doing. So in matchups like that, we just start off very far behind, and our removal's not good, our Blood Moons aren't always good enough, and we just end up losing. So I think that that's one of the bigger problems with the deck. But anyway, overall, my takeaways from the deck are it's fun to play, and I love Blood Moon decks, but I don't really like this exact build. I would probably cut the Godo in the equipment package, for one thing. I would go down some number of Pyroclasms and Volcanic Fallouts, and I would maximize the Blood Moon effects in the deck to make sure we're doing that, and probably mess with the numbers of the Mind Stones and bring in some Simian Spirit Guides to go along with extra Blood Moons to try to get Blood Moons as consistently, as quickly as possible. Like I said, not full all-in red or free win red where we're just slamming ritual into Blood Moon, but to try to maximize that part of our deck, because that's really the best thing our deck can do, and possibly look into the Boros Reckoner plan. Whether or not that's good enough, still, I'm not 100% sure, but it would be nice to be able to use our Skreds as actual burn spells to our opponent in matchups where they're not necessarily good fighting against creatures. So anyway, that's been our Much Brew About Nothing for this week. Make sure to vote for next week's deck by liking, commenting, and subscribing to Instant Deck Tech videos. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.